Okay, and you're live.
Good afternoon. I'm Jack Rudloe. I'm president of Gulf Specimen Marine Laboratory, and this is the Living Dock. And today is the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So let us begin by saying Happy Earth Day. In the middle of all this virus and everything else like that, the sun is shining, the water is still here, the snails are crawling up and down on the grass, the pelican is out there, and we're going to go out and explore the Living Dock. But before we even get too far out there, I want to show you the little miracle birdhouse over here. And let's put this into context. Okay, the birdhouse, this is a long net here, okay, which we need. Okay, the birdhouse just appeared here on the day of the hurricane. So about on October 11th of, I guess 2019 or whatever, Hurricane Michael came and smashed up the Living Dock, turned this place upside down, tore the steps off my house, loaded this place with debris. It was just total wreckage. And this whole dock was submerged and the floating docks were busted up, and you'll see new lumber, like we're standing on new lumber that was, rebuilt and destroyed. But the extraordinary thing is this thing, little birdhouse. This was not here before. This thing, in the midst of this hurricane and everything else, floated in and settled right at this spot. It's unbelievable. With the midst of all that violence, here it is. So this looks like a little Buddhist altar or whatever. I don't know what it is or how, but it came in, so we immediately screwed it down. It's been damaged a little bit, and we had to put it back together again, but nevertheless, it's here. So this is kind of a beneficent sign from wherever that says basically the Living Dock shall survive. And this dock has been battered and beat up through innumerable hurricanes. In fact, there was one, the original dock was ripped up in its entirety, thrown up into the marsh and completely destroyed, and we built this thing back. That was Hurricane Agnes in 1971. And then it got completely smashed up by Hurricane Kate in 85 and was broken all up and got rebuilt and redone. And it's been busted up by various assorted other hurricanes. So why do we keep doing this? Because it's the Living Dock, because this is our finger out into the ocean. This is a fixed place where things come and go. So I wrote a book about this. It was called The Living Dock at Panacea. And a little marked up here, but this is the book. And this was, this is one of the third or fourth editions. But the way this really got started is my publisher, Peter Rittner at the time, it was originally with World Publishing and then later Knopf when World kind of folded. But anyway, Peter said, I'm interested in doing nature things like Walden's Pond, where someone has a fixed place and they sit there and like Henry David Thoreau, and he had this little lake and he described what it is. So I said, I don't have a lake. I said, I have a dock. And he said, well, what about your dock? And I said, well, this is where we moor our boats, but this is where we grow things and we watch things. And he said, this is what I want a book on. So that turned into the Living Dock. And the Living Dock is sort of here over, what happens on this dock in the book is it's over a period of a year. The marine life that comes and goes, the jellyfish, what grows on the floating docks and so on. But we had our shrimp boat at the time, and the boat would go out to sea. So we would use this dock as and we still do, as our gateway out to the Gulf of Mexico. And that's what we basically did. And now we're going to go out and explore the dock itself and see what we can find out there. So,
I'll carry the net.
Huh?
I got the net.
You got the net. Okay,
Yep.
you got the net. Where did our pelican go? We get a lot of bird life out here on the dock, and it's pelicans come over here. We have great blue herons. The other day we had some otters here, and you could actually tell I didn't see the otter, but my other son Sky said he said they were out in the bay, kind of looking like little Loch Ness monsters as they kind of undulate along. But what he's noticed, because he fishes here a lot, is that just the jaws of the toadfish are left. So what they do is dive down, catch the toadfish on the bottom. That toadfish is a kind of a nasty grunting fish that has teeth. But they bring them up on the dock and eat the entire fish and just leave the jaws. So it sees the jaws there on the floating docks. I guess our pelican just moved off. So as we're walking out, we're kind of looking at the water, and we just checked our crab traps. There weren't anything in it this morning. So as we're going out here, we're looking at this nice murky water, which is full of plankton. Now you'll also see bushes and plants that we put down here. You can see it better on high tide, but these are just some of the bushes. This was from the tree trimming crew that came by, and this is the way to enhance fishing and to restore the Gulf. And much as I've tried to convince the state bureaucracy, the government, the federal government, the state government, the local government, that this is what we should be doing, instead of taking off the brush and things when they cut it and grind it up or haul it off to landfills, this is where it should be. The ocean can metabolize and utilize these things, and fish love to go into it. So here's oaks and bits of pine and everything else. And any of you have got a dock, you can do exactly the same thing. So what happens is the fish will grow on, the fish will come to these decaying leaves, the shrimp will eat them, baby crabs move in them, they just become these wonderful habitats. So when you set it on low tide, you'll see a lot more. Now this is all very green and just pushed out here, but after trees and bushes of any size sit here for a while, first of all the little branches and leaves all disappear and the main trunk stays, and oysters will grow on those under the right conditions. If barnacles don't crowd them out first, you can get some big beautiful oysters growing on it. So think of the opportunity we have and are not taking advantage of with a hurricane. The vast amount of timber and trees and everything else that were all torn down and destroyed during a hurricane, like this Hurricane Michael. Vast acreages of woods are sitting there just decaying and ready to catch fire, burn, and ultimately will creep its nutrients out in the rivers and out to the bays. But supposing we had a public works program, supposing we were to take these trees and bushes and plants and pull them out into the Gulf and plant them in Apalachicola and other areas, there is no telling what kind of productivity we would get. And one reason I really think that the Apalachicola Bay was as productive as it was before it got stripped out during the oil spill and before everybody got greedy and short-sighted and there was just changes in water quality, is what happened. There were sawmills all up and down this whole coast, especially in Apalachicola. There were like 11 sawmills, and they were busy butchering the timber and cutting the cypress and the logs and pine and everything else like that. And along came the hurricane, and it washed them all out to sea, and it became one big gigantic log jam in the 1850s that basically closed down the bay. So over the years, people were able to push channels into it, but the logs got wet, they got soaked, they sank, they got covered with mud and then overgrown with oysters. And then the little teredos, the shipworms, the bankia came in and devoured the wood and basically left the oysters growing behind, and the oysters fall down and they create a bar and build up. And I think the same thing could be done all over again. I'm not saying you have to murder all the forests to be able to do that, because we have enough woodfall out there. But for years and years, trees flushed out into the ocean. That's before we put dams up all on these rivers. So it was normal for trees to get washed out, scoured the banks, they would fall into the rivers, they would soak there, storms would push them out into sea, and then they wash around and they become driftwood. And in the driftwood, well, guess what? The little shipworms and the gribbles eat them all up and devour it and break it down. And And that's how we get oysters, have traveled around and other things. And what's really interesting is if you go back into the fossil record, as far back as the Devonian, in places like Poland, you'll be able to find trees and wood that have oyster-type creatures growing on them, shells. I guess Rita's interested in the net. Okay. So anyway, this has got a lot of potential here, and the living dock is kind of our laboratory. Some can say it's a kind of a playground to keep amused, but this is where we bring thousands of school kids out over the years, and we show them what lives in and around the waters of the living dock. So we're going to look at some of that right now, and we're going to see some of the really good stuff that grows here. I hope. You never know. But we have our lift net. I think we got it working this morning. We have a new net put on here so we can reach into it. And let's see what we get.
So what is the lift net?
All right, the lift net. This may be the oldest net in the world that can design from this thing. For many, many thousands of years, people have taken bamboo frames or wood, weaved in a mesh, dropped it down, and came up with some kind of contraption where you pull it up and it sort of pulls together, and the fish that are swimming around in there get caught up. So this is sort of our attempt at a design which really isn't nearly as good as the ones I've seen in Malaysia and Thailand and other places where people have lived and fished for the sea forever. So, I mean, they have little lift nets, they have great big lift nets that take a whole village to lift up at one time. But this is our attempt at it. So we let the net sit on the bottom. At night, these are lights that we can sometimes put on there, and they will attract all kinds of little fish and squid. Sometimes we get a whole bunch of squid in here, and we can get them and bring them up to the lab. But squid are very hard to keep alive. But let's see what our luck is today. So we basically have a winch mounted on the top up here, and a little controller. Now we never know what we're going to see. We've had stingrays get in here, we've had flounder get in here, we have anchovies and shrimp. You never know. Or nothing at all. Because we're just catching a piece of water. We have, whoa!
Oh my god! Whoa! Oh! What is that?
That's
Oh
a
my-
black drum.
That's
And
huge.
Yeah, it's going to complicate things for us a little bit.
Is that a remora too?
Huh?
A remora.
Yeah, there may be. Let me see. Wasn't expecting
You
him.
wanna lower it a
But
little?
he's not going to be. Oh yeah, he's got a remora on
Oh,
him too.
and he has a hook on his mouth.
And he's got a hook in his mouth, so
Yeah.
he's been caught before.
That's right.
But I think we're going to ultimately just let him go. So what I'm going to do right now is catch a few creatures here out of the net, and then we'll say goodbye to him because we certainly have no use for him right now as a specimen, since there are no specimens going out, a good
Oh, that's
specimen
huge.
right now to speak of, and nobody to look at them. But we have, but as I say, we never know what's going to be caught in here at all. So this is a nice black drum, and he's feeding on barnacles. And he loves the living dock, and there's anchovies that he's squishing right now. They're not going to fare too well out of this. But I'm going to lower this down a little bit, and I said you could eat him for dinner, Allison, but he's got, they got a lot of worms in him, and some would say extra protein. But black drum is one of the most heavily but we'll see what else we can scoop around, and we certainly want to take a look at his remora.
Yeah.
A little bit in shock. It must be kind of a shock to sit there and, well, Where is the remora? The remora is still sticking onto him, right?
I think it's underneath him.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
Just kind of flip him over. Excuse us. Oh, there it is. It's stuck on him.
Well, I'm not
right
sure
there.
that we're going to be able to catch the remora. But a remora has a little sucker disc on his head. I'll pull him up a little bit again. All right.
Are there a lot of red drum here?
Yeah, we get the red drum, which is what we call redfish here as well, and then the black drum.
Oh my gosh.
People don't like the black drum so much because they have a lot of parasites set and so on. But we'll see. All right, I don't know that we'll convince the remora to turn loose on him.
Oh, you're almost there.
Yeah, see there, the remora sticking on him. But the remora doesn't want to turn loose. He's going to hide. He's going to evade it. So unless we want to spend the rest of our time here trying to catch the remora. But look at all the anchovies that are in here. All these, they call them, well, people call them silver sides, but they're not, or glass minnows is a common name for them. We're talking about these guys. Probably a lot of them are going to die and get quickly consumed by crabs and other fish that are here. That's probably what he's here for, is to feed on them as well. So what I'm going to do is we'll leave him be for a minute. I'm going to come over here and scoop up some of the anchovies and the pinfish. Yeah, you don't want to get me tossed off into the water. That would be fitting. It wouldn't be the first time, but don't want to do it today. Okay. So we have silver perch here. And we have some nice pinfish. And lots of anchovies. Hope he'll get the hook out of his mouth, which I'm sure he will. All right, so now we're pressing the button, the winch. Let's get his bearings here. It's kind of a shock. Now we're going over the top. Good, huh? All right. He's been waiting for this live feed all day long, by the way. He's been hanging out here, I'm sure, to get on television or whatever we're on. So let's talk a little bit about what's here. So this is the silver percher known as yellowtails, Verdiella. And when they get bigger, they're nice little panfish. People like to feed on them. They like to eat worms and mud and other things. And he's an important bait fish. This is a spot Liostomus, which likes to live on mud and little tiny worms and things on the bottom. They're not a predator, but they're predator for little things in mud and tiny snails and worms. Again, another silver perch. But this guy is a predator. He is the pinfish. And they are voracious feeders. And he's probably eating anchovies if he can get them as well. And just like the drum would probably be nailing a few of these things. And people love to use these for bait because grouper love them. So the grouper, these live in grass beds and seagrass beds normally. And the gag grouper also lives in the seagrass beds, grows, and feeds primarily on the pinfish. Okay, so who else do we have? Well, another baby pinfish. Another spot or butterfish.
Is that a bunny?
Now here we have a bunny. So the bunny is the fully adult creature here, and they're kind of like little walking fish on the bottom, and they love to be around the living dock and the stuff that grows on the dock. So we'll throw him and the pinfish. So that leaves us the anchovies. So did we get somebody else left behind? Yeah. Well, another Liostomus, another spot.
Oh,
and a pinfish. Oh, and another bunny. So pretty good little haul for nothing there. Now we have oysters that drift along the bottom. That happens. Shells that are eaten up with things. But lately we have the anchovies. So I will show you that anchovies make good sashimi. So I'm going to eat one, but what we do is try to take the head off and the guts. Yeah, pull that out. That's a little bitter. And the rest of it is pretty good, although some lemon would be good and a little soy sauce and that kind of thing. And then if we're talking about eating things, well, where did my jellyfish go? Oh, well.
Are there any in here?
I thought there was a ctenophore in here, but maybe not.
Oh, there you go.
There he is. Okay, yeah. See, that's the, well, we'll catch a fresh one. Okay, so anyway, we're going to say bye to these fish. And some of them, see the scales coming off. They always shed scales. Actually, that's a defense mechanism. So if they throw enough scales and enough confusion, when a predator comes into them, they will strike at the scales instead. But while we've got the tray here, I'm going to show you what a lot of these things are attracted to. The anchovies and other things is the plankton feeding fouling organisms. Well, here we go. So this is just a rope hung in the water, a piece of rope. Look at the stuff that's on it. All right. This is actually a seething mass of life. I'll get a, it doesn't take much water in here, just a little bit. But this is all this brown goop and nasty stuff like that. It's actually a bunch of tube-building amphipods and little micro crustaceans. Because we have to let it settle here for a minute. And this is where we would have barnacle larvae and worms growing in these things. Oh, those are sea anemones. You see the little pink dots? That's sea anemones that like to grow in that. But I'm betting if this sits for a minute, we'll see little bugs writhing around in it. They have little worms, copepods. Yeah, maybe.
They're real tiny. I don't think.
Real tiny. You're not going to see much. They
Yeah.
look like little micro
There you
dots
go.
here. But maybe. Well, let's see what else we can find that might be more visible. I haven't checked down here in a while. Let's see. Okay, now these are plastic floats that keep the dock up. This is why it's a floating dock that rises and falls with the tide. So I'm reaching underneath and I'm pulling off sponges and things here. So this looks like just garbage, but it's not. This is the green sponge, Halachondria, and has its greenish color because it has zooxanthellae, an algae that lives in its tissues. And this sponge has one of the most deadliest compounds in it that can be found in nature. It's called ocadalic acid, And we've worked with pharmaceutical companies to get, you know, I don't know, about a ton of this at different areas. We know where it grows in big numbers. But this has anemones living in it as well, and little worms, and we're just checking. But here's some more anemones.
I heard it smells like garlic.
Not this one. Now we have garlic sponges. We could do a whole big thing on sponges, but this is, yeah, well, we'll keep looking. What I really want to do is get some hydroids. I guess we've had hydroids down here lately, haven't we? Yeah. So let me see. Okay. More sponge, but a little bit of hydroid on that. Not what I'm really hoping for. But we will probably get some shrimp here. Okay, you can see some of the algae growing on here and some of the hydroids as well. And this is what we feed creatures. This little branch stuff is actually related. This over here is related to jellyfish. Oh, and you can see actually, this is full of skeleton shrimp. You can really see them swarming. Look at that. Just watch that. Try focusing for a second. You see all that writhing little motions in there?
The black long strings.
Yeah, the little strings that are wiggling under their own power. That is called caprella, and that is the skeleton shrimp. And that is what is going to be fed on by crabs and by other little creatures that are in here as well. And then we have barnacles. There's some live barnacles mixed in here. See, here's some barnacles I pulled off. Now each of these barnacles, you know, this is what covers your boat bottom, and you got to scrape it off. But every one of these barnacles is producing thousands of little larvae, which are putting out into the water. And all those anchovies that we just saw, that I just ate one, those are eating the barnacle larvae. Those are eating the zooplankton. Those are eating a lot of these little creatures that are in this seething mass of life in this tiny little thing that has all these organisms in there, you know. So, and we just never know what we're going to see. It's going to be growing on this thing at times. Sometimes there'll be sea squirts on them. Sometimes there'll be big bushes of hydroids. We get sea slugs, nudibranchs in them. I mean, this is, mind you, we just stood over here and just scooped up a little bit of handful right over here. But that's why this is called the living dock. It's because it is living. Whenever you put anything in the water, whether it's this tray or this piece of wood or anything else like that, it's going to become a substrate, and there's going to be barnacles growing on it, and there's going to be all these other fouling organisms, and under the right conditions and places, there's going to be oysters growing here as well. Oh, look behind you, our visitor has come.
Oh.
You're a little late. We just let everybody go. But he'll come by. So I see you got a nice ctenophore here, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And this is what glows in the dark at night. This would be lit up like a big candle. I won't eat this one because it grosses people out. But ctenophores, jellyfish, are extremely good for you. They have a great deal of collagen in them. In fact, this jellyfish has collagen type 5 in it, which is the same thing. We're looking at each other through our cornea. It's the same kind of clear protein. That's all part of the whole business, and it's important. So, now what might be fun, we've been here for a few minutes. Let's see if we can help our friend out here. Now let's do the lift net again one more time. And you wouldn't think there'd be much any stuff in there because we disturbed it and everything else, but that's probably not true. So by just putting a little of this food back in here, I bet we'll probably have a nice new crop of anchovies here. But you never know. Sometimes, again, you never know. Jack me quick. Okay. I'm really not up for jumping over the candlestick today, but we'll give it a shot. So here goes another lift. backs are menhaden that have moved in. And see how good our friend is over here in catching them. Okay, so we have some scaled sardines, Harangula, that have come in. These little hard-shelled, nice and glittery and gold. Okay, so let's see how good he is at catching. How's he doing? You got him? You got him.
Yep.
Okay.
He wants more.
He wants more. Well, we'll give him a bunch more. That means some are going to make it and some aren't going to make it. Come on. Yep, you missed that one. I know one doctor in Pensacola who he does gastroenterology and he has clinics and all that stuff. But his big hobby in life is he has a couple of blue herons off his dock, and he spends a great deal of time just fishing to feed them the same way. So at least I'm doing it the lazy way. He's not. Did you get it? Yep. All right. There we go. Some more. Okay. He missed. No, he didn't. Okay. All right, we'll do a few more here and then let down, and he can pick up the survivors. So he knows a good thing when he's got it. Now pelicans were almost extinct back in the 50s. They were spraying DDT and it killed their eggs, made the eggs soft shell. So for a long time they had disappeared. But because we had environmental regulations and protection, we were able to, we, meaning the society at large, was able to help bring their numbers back. And now with the relaxations or attempted relaxations of legislation, all kinds of pesticides and pollutions, these could be endangered again. Fortunately, the courts have been upholding environmental regulations over the current administration. So it basically says society wants this pelican, it wants these fish, it wants this environment and all this habitat. And here it is. I think our friend approves. Now we're also getting some gulls that are coming around, and they're going to be going after the anchovies that are floating. Nothing is wasted. Everything is recycled. And that's another big complaint of mine, is that we had our government and our EPA and other groups that said, you can't put seafood waste into the bay. So for a long time, they were making, say, processing plants that used to dump their stuff into the rivers, and they had hordes of catfish and sharks and everything else and crabs eating it, and they basically made them haul it to landfills, bury it, stink it up, put it and grind it up, put it in sewers. Incredibly stupid things. If you take protein out of the ocean, you put it back. When we cook up shrimp and we take the heads off and get the shells out, I always bring the shrimp back and throw it back here. That's because we're saying thank you to the ocean. That's kind of like our little altar up there. So now that I'm up, I'm looking at some of the stuff on this other side that's growing, and let's see what we can pull up over here. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of hydroids and I'm seeing sea squirts. So, for example, this cookie licking stuff is a sea squirt. tunicates called Echinacea turbinata. Echinacea has strong chemicals in them. I think it's really called echinacidine or whatever, that is actually very effective for breast cancer and is being used to treat breast cancer because it has these strong elements. So there is a company in Spain that started processing these things, and the research has been going on to say, why does something like this injected into the human body reach into tumor cells and stop breast cancer? Why does it do that? Well, good question, but all we know is it does. Why does certain medicinal plants work? So this is all part of the work that we did with the National Cancer Institute in 1968 when I went on the Today Show with my first book, The Sea Brings Forth. And they asked for, give us a pound of everything you can get your hands on in there, and let's see what happens. And a number of things rang the front doorbell. This was one of them. This was Echinacea, and this is one that has been used in drug research ever since. Another is a bryozoa and a moss animal called bryostatin, which is really an incredible thing because it's been able to reverse stroke in mice, and it looks like it's an antiviral that works on Alzheimer's disease potentially. And there's a great deal of stuff that can be developed and worked out of the Gulf. And what's so hilarious is a funky little nowhere place like Panacea and this struggling Gulf specimen marine lab that gets no state, no federal, no local funds whatsoever. In fact, we're officially on the blacklist. You can say that any which way. But no matter what our accomplishments are, putting creatures up in outer space aboard the space shuttle, working with the Howard Hughes Medical Institute and developing models for brain degenerating diseases with electric rays, on and on, the thousands of school kids, the word is no, we are not going to give you a dime. I don't know why. Some people could say it's my loud mouth and my raising trouble with environmental issues and trying to stop the development. I mean, look at this bay. The great plan was to dredge this bay out, bring in cruise ships that were here, build condominiums on the shore, all of that. And I stood up over the years with my late wife, Dr. Ann Rudloe, and we said no. And we fought, and we went into lawsuits, and we got harassed, and we got troubled. But the bottom line is we survived. Now, do we survive to where we can make this into one of the world's superclass environmental centers and continue more of this? That remains to be seen. Will we survive the virus? I'm sure we will. One way or the other, we will. We will be here. We will not get the millions of dollars that, say, the Florida State University Marine Lab has been able to get because they smile. Or we haven't been able to get state, the NOAA fisheries funding has said no. The EPA certainly says no. A big fat proposal we wrote years ago, and they said our additions, our monies were $3.12 off, and we made an arithmetical error and rejected the entire proposal. I mean, all of this goes on and on. And then, of course, the worst offenders is the Triumph Gulf Coast, because that money was allocated to be coming right here to this panhandle to help with organizations like this. And did they do it? No, they did not. So I will not stay on that soapbox, but I'm saying, look at the accomplishment we have done. And I say to the people on the Triumph board, what have you done for humanity? What have you done to develop new drugs or anything of that sort? And we can let that go at that. But the point is, I couldn't do any of that without this. I couldn't do any of that without the healthy, clean environment that we have here. And the sunshine, the birds, the habitat, the whole business. This is what has made Gulf Specimen, and this is the fascination with life. And if I was the only one on the planet that had that fascination, that wouldn't be it. But we have all these thousands of school kids that come here that are so excited. When this lift net comes up and they see that pelican and they see birds and they see these other things, they just get so excited and they just want to learn more and know more. And they go back to their classes and they ask questions. So we can't wait for this whole virus thing to get over with, so we can bring our kids back and hear the laughter of children and their excitement when they came up here. Believe me, when that black drum came up in the net and there was a classroom here, it would be deafening with all the the sound and the laughter and the excitement and everything else and the wonder. So that's where we're at, and I want to thank you all for coming down to the Living Dock today, and hope that's it.